Hi, everybody.
Hi, Sarah.
Thanks for coming to our last Lunch and Learn of the semester. Here, winding down. So if you haven't already, help yourself to whatever snacks are left on the back table. And I just want to present Dr. Alan Lipscomb, who will be talking today about licensure in California. So let's give it up for Dr.
So I am gearing this presentation for my graduate folks. Why? Because for my graduating folks. Why? Because next year I'm going to do it again for those that are going to be graduating next year. Nothing's going to change between this year and next year. There are just major changes for those that came last year to this year. Okay, so that's why I wanted to make sure I did this again because there's major changes. So I will be doing this again for the 2017 graduating class. So I wanted to make sure that all of the graduating folks got the tracking log. Okay? If you did not get the tracking log, raise your hand and we'll get that to you because I'm going to go over that. So I want to start off with how do you register? So after you graduate, what's the process? What do I do? What can I do now? I know some of you are already thinking about that. I heard from some of my graduating class that they went to the fair, the job fair in Carson, and they were saying that if you don't even have your BBS number, they won't even interview you, won't even look at you. So we'll talk about how to put that on your resume when you're in the process of getting your BBS number. So the application, I have one application packet. You can get all of these resources online if you go to, so I'll pass this around. Go to BBS, so the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and you can click on forms, and it's going to say ASW, which stands for Associate Clinical Social Worker, ASW, Associate Clinical Social Worker, and you can download the full application packet. I recommend for those that want to start counting their hours and getting their BBS registration number to download the application soon, sometime this week, tonight, etc. Okay, and I'll walk you through that part. So what you want to do is, for your application, the address that you use on there is going to be public information. Okay? Because you are registered as an associate clinical social worker, it is public knowledge because you are a provider of mental health services. So your consumers, clients, patients can look you up on the BBS website. A, to make sure your registration is still active. Once you get licensed, B, to make sure you're still licensed. Your license hasn't been suspended, there's nothing being counted against you, etc. So what you might want to do, if you don't want your home address to be public knowledge, get a P.O. box. Get a P.O. box. Here's the thing, don't forget that you got a P.O. box because all of your BBS, registration, renewal, etc. will come to that address that you list. Okay? So make sure you're aware of that and you keep in mind if you do a P.O. box, make sure you check it. Okay? You want to get a photograph, a passport size photograph of yourself. It has to be taken within the past 60 days. That's going to be attached to your application. You have to attach that to your application to register. There is a $75 non-refundable fee, and the check should be made out to, or the cashier's check should be made out to Behavioral Sciences Fund. Behavioral Sciences Fund. Okay? Live scan. You can start live scanning now. You can start live scanning now. Why? The BBS will hold your fingerprinting on their file for 6 months. For 6 months. Okay? So in the application, there are several forms towards the end of the application that's going around that you have to fill out and take to the live scanning operator so that you can do that. And it's okay to do that now. Degree verification, official transcripts required. You need to wait, for the graduating folks, you need to wait until your degree verifies. Your degree, Master's of Social Work, verifies. Don't send in, don't request just your transcripts right now. They need verification that you completed and have the degree. That should be available like the first, second week in June, if not sooner. Okay? So you can put that request in. Now, some folks say that you can go ahead and send it separate. Send your application and then send this, bless you, when your degree verifies. I say hold on. That's just my anxiety. I want to keep everything together. I want to send it off together. I want to get a certificate of mailing so I get confirmation that they got it back. And then I can start counting about how long it should take to get an answer as far as my registration number. It takes about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, could be sooner, okay, to get your BBS number, Board of Behavioral Science registration number, okay? You don't have to worry about taking a law and ethics course because you've taken that in your 510 class that covers law and ethics, okay? Yeah, back in 2014, remember when? Okay? Once you have all of that, you can send off your application. Okay? That's all you need to do to get your registration number. So on your resume, at the top, under your name, somewhere that's visible, you want to put BBS registration in process. That way, for organizations, agencies that are hiring or looking for folks to interview, they'll see that, okay, they're in the process of getting their BBS number. Okay? Because some folks won't even pull your resume or interview you if they know that you don't have it or don't see it indicated on your resume. So make sure you put that on there. Any questions regarding the application piece? So again, you can start the application now, filling it out. You can get the live scan now. Think about if you want to use your home address for public knowledge, public information. If not, get a P.O. box. Don't forget that you have a P.O. box if you get it. Okay. So let me go over the hour requirements, and I will make these slides available for you all, and you'll get the breakdown. Again, you can just go to the website for it. So you need a total, once you get your hours, that's when you can start counting. You need a total of 3,200 hours. 3,200 hours. You also need 104 supervised weeks of clinical work. 3,200 hours, and you also need 104 supervised weeks. Doing it full time. If you do it full time, you'll have your hours within 2 years. If you're doing it full time, okay? You can't start counting your hours until you've registered with the board, okay? So let's say they hire you on and they say you can start June, but you don't have your registration number yet. So they said instead of bringing you on as a clinician or a PSW2, they'll bring you on as a PSW1. You can work that time, but you can't start counting until you get that letter with your certificate that says you're registered as an associate social worker. Then you can start counting your hours. Okay? So from that time, you want to start doing that. Now, there is a breakdown of how you track and count your hours. I passed out for the graduating class a tracking sheet. Now they have it electronic. There's different apps you can do that will, you plug in your numbers and it'll keep track of it for you. I'm going to show you the old school way that I did it, and then you can decide what you want to do. You have to pay for that system if you do it electronically to keep track of your hours. Okay, so say for example, I sent off my application and I got my registration number and it started today, right? So today is what, 4/12. So that would be week 1. Okay? That would be week 1, and go straight down. So I would put 4/12 at the top, and then I would count those hours that week. And every week thereafter will be by Tuesdays. Week 1, 4/12, week 2, 4/19, week 3, so on and so forth. You're counting by Tuesdays if that's the day you got, if that's the registration number date. So make sure you pay attention to what date on your registration certificate that you can start counting. There's some people that say you can actually start counting that Sunday of the date that you got it. No, no, no. Start counting the actual date of the registration on your certificate. Okay? And you just go straight down. So what can you count? You can count clinical psychosocial diagnosing, assessment, treatment planning, if you're doing individual psychotherapy, if you're doing group psychotherapy, if you're doing crisis interventions, if you're doing problem-solving therapy, clinical case management, intensive case management, you can count all of those hours. Okay? On the tracking sheet, it's how many hours total did you do clinical? Psychosocial assessing, treatment planning, diagnosing, and actual therapy. Then the sub piece, A1, they want to know, well, how many of those hours did you actually do group or psychotherapy? So you just pull out how many hours. So say, for example, in a work week, 40 hours, if I'm doing it full time, I did 25 hours of psychosocial assessing, diagnosing, treatment planning, and therapy. Of those 25 hours, they want to know how many was psychotherapy and group work, individual or group. So let's say out of 25 hours, I did 15 hours of direct therapeutic services contact, okay? Then you have a section for client-centered advocacy, consultation, evaluation, and research. So of your 40-hour work week, if you're doing it full time, how much time did you spend researching services, programs, consulting with colleagues, consulting with your supervisor about a case, not so much in supervision, but just in general, researching the diagnosis, researching the treatment model or treatment plan. You're going to capture all that time there, okay? You can only count 40 hours a week maximum. So even if you work overtime, right, you can only count 40 hours a week. That's the maximum amount of hours that you can count. So if you do work overtime, I tell the folks that I supervise, count 40. Make sure you capture at least the 40 if you're working 60 hours a week. Get your 40 at least, okay? So I just went over the different pieces that you, how you divide up your hours. Let me finish my last thought and then you can go ahead and ask your question. You can do 2 hours of group supervision, right, by a licensed professional a week, or 1 hour of face-to-face individual supervision a week by a licensed professional, okay? And I'll pick up from that piece after I get this question.
If you do overtime hours, can you count those hours for the following week?
It can get tricky depending on how you're counting, because then you may always be ahead a week, so it may throw you off. So just, if you do that, just be careful and look at that through. You're going to get your hours, your 3,200, before you get your 104 weeks. That's what you have to be aware of, the 104 weeks supervised. Because you're going to get your 3,200 hours quickly. You may get your 132 hours after, let's say, maybe a year and a half. But you still have to continue to accrue until you have the 104 weeks.
What about when you work part-time? Like, let's say you only work 20 hours. Is there like how, because then it's going to take you longer years.
It's going to take you longer.
And is that okay, or is there like a time cap in which you have to finish the hours?
Good question. So you have 6 years to accrue all of your hours for licensure. So if you're doing it part-time, let's say 20 hours a week, it's probably going to take you 4 years to get the 3,200.
Let's say you stay home for 1 year because you have a child. Does
Yes.
that count in the 6 years, or can you let's say if you work part-time 2 years and then you stay home for 1 year and then you come back, does that 1 year count in the 6 years?
It does. The clock is ticking the moment you register with the board.
Clock is always ticking for the
It's always ticking
Always.
for everyone, right? They don't discriminate. It ticks for everyone. So, and that's the thing to be aware of. For my folks that are going to DCFS for 2 years, you need to make sure that you can, if you want to register, that you can get your clinical supervision so you can get your hours. Because you don't want the clock to start ticking and then you're there for 2 years and maybe you stay another year, so now you're 3 years. Then it only gives you 3 years to get your hours. So what happens if you reach your 6 years? A couple of things could happen. One, you may have to re-register to get a whole new number and start accruing all over again. 2, you start losing your earlier hours from the earlier years. Okay? So you just want to be aware of that. Okay? As you're accruing your hours.
You can't get supervised hours.
Speak up a little bit louder.
You can't get supervised hours if you're with DCFS.
You can, but you have to make sure A, they're licensed, B, that they completed the training in order to supervise. and then you have to look at your caseload too.
Also, can it be one consistent person, or can it be multiple people?
It can be multiple people. It's up to you to keep track of who those multiple people, because they have to fill out forms that they agree to supervise you.
You mentioned the hours for supervision. So if I'm at an agency that provides weekly, individual, and group supervision, can I get 3 hours a week?
You can. You can count both. So you can count if your agency requires that everyone goes to group supervision a week and everyone goes to individual supervision a week, then you can count those 3 hours of supervision. It doesn't matter because you still got to do 104 weeks. So you can have 10 hours of supervision a week. You still got to do 104 weeks. Yes?
Can you have a licensed family therapist supervise you?
You can. You can have a licensed marriage and family therapist can supervise your hours, licensed psychologist, a licensed educational psychologist. I feel like I'm missing, oh, and then of course an LCSW.
A psychiatrist?
A psychiatrist cannot. A psychiatrist cannot. They can supervise you, but it can't count towards licensure. Here's the catch. If it's not an LCSW, then if it's not an LCSW, so it's like an LMFT, you have to get at least 1,700 hours from an LCSW. 1,700 of your 3,200 must be supervised by an LCSW. Okay, so in a year, in 52 weeks, that counts for about 13 weeks. So in a year, so say you have an LMFT supervising you, you need to make sure in that 52 weeks, at least 13 of those weeks was by an LCSW for that 1 year. And then you need 13 more weeks for that second year, to a total of 26 weeks of an LCSW. And then the rest can be by whomever. Yes?
So like, let's say you're working with an MSW, and then can you get those 13 from a licensed social worker? Can you volunteer somewhere, or does it have to be?
Great
Like,
question.
let's say you need extra supervision from a social worker, but you're somewhere employed where they are not. Can you do like weekend hours
You
somewhere?
sure can.
Oh.
Yes. So for my folks that are getting certain positions where you don't have direct contact to do the clinical piece, you can volunteer somewhere, weekends or evenings. You can actually get paid too, but you can volunteer too. On the board's website, there is a template of a letter of volunteering. Download that template, put it on the letterhead for that organization that you're volunteering for, and sign off and agree, because you're going to have to submit that letter, and I'll pass this volunteer letter around when it's time for you to submit all of your forms and documentation and hours to the board after you accrued all your hours. So you can volunteer and get your hours too. Okay? Yes?
What about if you're like at one agency the first year, and then the second year at a different agency? Do those hours roll over?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just make sure at the second agency you have someone that can supervise your hours. For each supervisor that supervises you, they have to complete a couple of things. One, they have to complete a responsibility statement for supervisors of an associate clinical social worker. Let me pass this around. You get this on the website too. And then they have to have a supervisory plan that they have to complete. Once you have accrued all your hours under that person, so say I'm at an agency today and I leave in September and they supervise me, I have to not only have those 2 forms filled out at the beginning, but at the end, I have to count how many of those hours was under that supervisor from April to August or September, whenever I left. You want to get that before you leave, so I always tell people, when you quit, don't storm out until you get your signatures. Because it's hard. It's hard to get it later, right? So just do your 2 weeks, get your signatures, and then leave. Okay? Yes?
Real quick on this form, like I know you mentioned that other settings.
The tracking log?
Yeah, on the tracking log. Like in other settings that aren't necessarily long-term therapy, like you mentioned, like intensive, like case management or crisis intervention and things like that. Where would those types of services fall on A or B?
So what we would look at, so if I was your supervisor, you're doing intensive case management, we're going to look at your caseload. We're going to look at the type of services that you're providing, because it's going to be probably split up between A and also B, right? Depends on what you're doing. If you're doing like crisis intervention, situational counseling, then we'll carve out that for A1, right?
Okay.
So because I consult with a couple of shelters that I do supervision for, and that's what we do with them, because they do more crisis intervention, intensive case management. Okay, so let me go over the continuing education units requirement. And this is something you want to follow up with the board just to make sure, okay? And I'll tell you what you need to make sure about. Before you can sit for the actual licensing exam, you have to complete the following. However, in your program, the content was built in. So, child abuse assessment and reporting, 510, right? Human sexuality, 502. Alcoholism and other chemical substance dependency, that could have been in your 502, depending on 510, possibly. Spousal and partner abuse assessment, detection and intervention, 601. Aging, long-term care, and elder dependent, adult abuse, that would be 502. Thank you. California law and professional ethics, that would be 510. You want to make sure, though, because this is a new thing, and you want to make sure that your university, so if you're calling the BBS, you want to make sure that in your university's curriculum that the board has all these listed in there. If not, then you have to get them separately, and these are the hours you need to get. If you go through like ASWB to do your continuing education, if you do it online. If you are doing it through like online Psy.D, CEUs or whatever, make sure they are BBS approved CEU provided. Because many conferences, many online continuing education places provide them, but are they a BBS approved provider? Because you don't want to spend the money and do all that when it doesn't even count, because they're not a BBS approved provider.
So, as it stands right now, the classes we have, which of those are covered by our classes? And which,
All of them.
all of, so we don't have to do those extra ones?
Yeah, but you just want to make sure, once you, before you submit all your hours for licensure, you want to make sure that it was covered.
Okay.
That the
But as
BBS
of right now, as far as you know right now, those are all covered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Now, once we graduate, then we have to complete 38 every 2 years, right? So it's like,
once you're licensed.
once we're licensed.
Once you're licensed.
Okay, so for now, getting our number, we have the ones with the CEU we need.
Yeah.
Right, and so in 2 years, we need to complete again, complete 38.
No, only when you're licensed you need to do 38 weeks. Okay? But I'm going to tell you another piece in a moment. So it says once you're licensed, you must complete 38 CEUs every 2 years to maintain it. When you're registered, your registration expires every year. Your registration expires every year. Here's the new thing. In order for you to renew your registration each year, well, the first year, you have to sit for the first part of the exam, which is just law and ethics.
We have to take law and ethics every year.
You have to attempt it the first time.
Yeah.
If you pass it, then you don't have to take it again because you passed it. As long as you attempt to take the next test, which is the clinical one, before that year of passing the first one, no, sorry. After you pass the first one, so say you take it next year and you pass it, you then have to accrue the rest of your hours, and then you can sit for the second one, which is the clinical. So you can sit for one during your first year of being registered. You can't sit for the next one until you have all of your hours done.
Okay.
And that's the clinical one. That's the difference. I'm going to reiterate it again and give you a visual so that you have that. Go ahead.
So you said we need 38 CEUs and...
No, that's once you're licensed.
Right, so after your license, each class is like a certain credit?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how it's broken down? Or just...
Yeah. 7 hours, 10 hours, those are the credits. They're hours. So if you do like a 15-hour spousal and partner abuse, continuing education training, those are the hours.
They translate into units? Hours and units?
They look at hours.
Oh, this is 38 hours.
Correct.
So 38 hours?
Yeah. That's what it's going to add up to. Okay, so now you have all of your hours and you're ready for your examinations, right? You have to do another application. Yeah, so now you have to say, I'm ready. Right? So you have to fill out another application, another photograph. They need to match it, make sure you're the person who started, several years back. $200 for application fee, and this should say clinical exam, not written because they don't have written anymore. Once you have successfully passed the California Law and Ethics exam, you must complete an application for ASWB, and I'll talk about that in a moment, with $260 fee for that separate exam. That's a national one, folks. They're moving towards national licensure recognition. So yeah, that's a good thing. So if you were, once you were licensed, moved to a different state, you would just have to take the law and ethics equivalent in that state, because laws are different in different states. Okay? For my folks online, so I know this is being recorded, for the online off-site folks that live in different states, this process is different depending on what state you're in. For those that are going to move to a different state when you graduate, this process is different. Okay? So you need to check with the board at that particular state on the licensure process, because it's going to be different from state to state. Does that make sense? Okay. So you need verification of your CEUs that you took or your transcripts, verifying that you took all the necessary hours that you need. They need the supervised experience form from all of your supervisors. And that form is going around. So every single supervisor that you accrue supervision under for licensure hours, they need to submit that. They need to sign it, so they need to give it back to you, and you need to submit all of that. They don't submit it separately, you submit all your stuff together. Okay? So if you have one person supervising you that whole time, it's easy, because you just need one signature. But if you have multiple people supervising you over that 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, then you need multiple.
This is a separate document than the original 2 documents you said that we need the...
Correct.
Okay.
So the original ones you need to start is the responsibility statement and then supervisory plan. And then once you finish counting the hours, then you need the experience verification one.
Got it.
Signed off. Yes.
For verifying our CUs that counted in our coursework, would that be like submitting
Transcript.
like our transcript?
Yes.
So this supervisor experience form, should we get that? Does it have to be current? Like, let's say for 1 year you work somewhere and
Yes.
then you go somewhere else. But do you have to get it when you leave there, that you get all the experience? Or once you are done, you have to go back and, because sometimes it's hard
No.
to find people after the fact.
That's why you need to get it before you leave.
Okay, so that's when your time finishes with that supervisor, and then that's when you get
That's when you get that form.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the application for the BBS number, I might have missed this. What did you say we have to provide them for the human behavior course?
That's going to be in your
So
transcript.
they don't have to send anything
No,
again?
just to get registered, you're good. Yeah. Some challenges to be aware of while collecting your clinical hours. Unable to retrieve signatures from clinical supervisors. And you're bringing up great examples. These are the reasons why it could be a challenge to get those hours because you're leaving, or maybe your supervisor leaves, right? And so then you have to get them to sign your hours before they leave. Clinical supervisor is no longer licensed or loses license during the time that you're accruing hours. I always tell folks, look up the person on the BBS's website that you're accruing hours under periodically. I tell people, look me up too. Make sure, because if my license is suspended, your hours are suspended for that time, and you can't count those hours during the time that my license was suspended, or maybe I didn't pay my registration so it lapsed. You can't count any of those hours, okay? So make sure that your supervisor still has their license while you're getting your hours, yes?
They also need to complete a training to supervise us?
Correct.
Is there a way to verify that they?
Ask them for a copy of their certificate of completion. So Javier was asking, is there a way to verify that your clinical supervisor can supervise you? Yes, you can ask them for a copy, a printout of their training that they completed, their CEU training verification, and then they can give you a copy. So I give a copy to all my folks that I supervise so that they have it.
What is the cost to renew? Is it the same as when you apply? I don't know, did you have that?
I think it's like $75 or
So it's
something
like
like
the
that to
same.
renew. Yeah, it's around that. Yeah. I was gonna say something else. Oh, for interviewing. When you're interviewing, you want to ask the question to the employer, do they provide funding for professional development? Meaning for you to get trained, paying for your registration, etc. Some agencies will pay that for you, right? So maybe they'll reimburse you after you pay for it, etc. The agency that I was with, they paid for our registration every year, and they also paid, they gave us $350 a year for other trainings, and so I used that for like test material and study prep. And so you want to ask that question. Another way to ask it is, how do you promote professional development here at your agency or organization? How do you promote professional development? When they ask you, do you have any questions for us? Yes, you do. Never say no, unless you don't care. And you're like, no, I don't, because I don't think I'll be here. So then don't ask the question. But if you want the position, yes, you have a question. Okay? So make sure you ask questions. Yes?
I'm a little confused. So let's say you have 1,000 hours.
Yes.
You're my supervisor.
Yes.
And then you lose your license.
Yes.
Do all my 1,000 hours don't
Depends
count?
when I lost it. Did I lose it today? Did I lose it back in December?
No, you lost it today.
So you just can't count today.
Oh, okay.
Follow?
Sure.
Yeah. What was, I had one person that I was providing external supervision for more professional and clinical growth, but she wasn't counting her hours under me because she was getting that at her agency. Well, she went off on leave. The same month that she went off on leave, she gave birth. Her registration expired. She forgot. FMLA was off. Went back in October. So July she went off. October she went back. Accrued hours. Come January, HR contacted her and said, you haven't submitted your registration. And we checked on the website. You haven't been registered since since July. So she couldn't count any of those hours when she came back to January. And then they demoted her from a mental health therapist to a case manager because you can't provide psychotherapy as a therapist if you're not registered with the board. So you see how it can impact, right? That's what I said. If you have a P.O. box, be aware, check your P.O. box, because that's where your registration is going to go. So you can't count your hours for that time that you didn't pay your registration. Okay? So just being aware of that. So what are the exams? So these are the new exams. The California Law and Ethics. That's the first test. It's all multiple choice, right? So you'll go to like a testing center to take that exam. And then the ASWB Associate of Social Work Board Clinical Examination. That's the second test. It's all multiple choice as well. Okay? So both are all multiple choice. The first one you have to take within your first year before you can re-register. If you don't pass, I know you like worst case scenarios, so if you do not pass, you have to take the Law and Ethics Continuing Education credit, right? And then they'll give you your registration, they'll renew it, and then you have 90 days to retake this. Now, since I know you like worst case scenarios, let's keep going with it. Well, what if I don't pass it again after 90 days? We'll wait 90 days and take it again. Well, how many times can I take it? You can take it until you pass it. Okay? Every 90 days, you can qualify to sit for it. Do not allow time to lapse over a year since the last time you've taken it. Okay? Don't let time go by. Get back in there and take it again. Wait the 90 days if you don't. Get back in there and take it again. Now, I can't tell you what it's like because it's new. And so the folks that I'm supervising, they'll be taking it in June. So I don't know what it's like as far as actually someone taking it. I can tell you the logistics of it, like how many questions and all that good stuff. But I don't know what it's like for someone to actually take it that I've supervised. Yes?
And then do you pay every time, every 90 days?
I think so. I think you have to repay, I think. So read those letters that they send out to you when they say, you didn't pass, please, blah, 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 and then go ahead and do it. Okay? You cannot take the second one until you pass the first one. And also, you cannot take the second one until you have all of your hours to sit for the second one. Yes.
So if we're after we graduate, then we take the first one.
So if you after you graduate, let's say you get your registration number, and I heard from, I was at the gas station, quick story, and I saw an alumni, and I was like, oh, quick, I'm going to be doing a training. How long did it take for you to get your registration from when you graduated? They got it by the end of June. They graduated May, they had their number by June. So they're taking the law and ethics by June of this year. So you'll be taking yours by July of next year, whatever your number starts by that. A year from when you get your number. Yes. So you for sure, for those who are going to register, you're for sure going to be taking it in 2017. The law and ethics one. Okay? It comes pretty quickly from what I hear from folks. Yes?
So do you recommend starting to take it earlier in the year so that you don't get to that point where your renewal is up in your time?
Yeah, I do. Especially if you're an anxious person. I would. I wish that there was like this when I took it. Because I felt like it was fresh when I got out of graduate school, and then you work for an agency, you learn their policies and stuff, so then 2-3 years out, you're relearning the law and everything else. So I felt like if I did it closer to graduation, when I had the information and the knowledge, I would have done better, you know, and when it was time for me to sit for the exam. So I like the fact, and it's easy for me to say, but I do like the fact that you get to take the first test sooner. Yes?
So the law and ethics exam, is there, so you have to take within the first year after you get your number?
Before you register for your, they're not going to let you register unless you have attempted the law and ethics.
So you basically, once you have your number, you can take it the next day, or is there a specific time you have to?
You know what, I haven't heard our requirements, so that would be something to follow up with.
Okay.
I haven't heard that you have to at least have 6 months worth or whatever. What I do know is that you can't register until you have attempted to take the test.
Right, it would also be important to know if you work part-time, because you don't have as many hours, like when would you take it, the law and ethics?
That's something you're going to have to think of, because you are going to have to take it within a year. They don't care if you're doing it full-time, part-time.
So you can basically take it as early as you want?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Last year you mentioned that there are test accommodations.
Yes.
Do you know how, should we just go through BBS, follow their?
Yeah, what they want is getting a letter from your physician, whomever, and then you have to send that to BBS and contact them to find out exactly who you need to submit it to or send it attention to.
So DRES, like if we're registered with DRES, like they would want the original letter that we submitted to DRES.
Correct, they would need something from DRES. Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask, maybe you'll cover this later, is test prep. Do you have resources?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned that our registration expires every year.
Correct.
So if we graduate this year and I get my number in June,
Yes.
then it will expire before I take the law and ethics.
It will expire no matter what. In order to renew it for the next year, you have to attempt the law and ethics. That's like a prerequisite. Yes.
Because you're saying that you have to attempt, and then the slide says you have to pass
Well,
the exam. So
I found out some new information since last month when I presented.
also
this.
now it's just
Yeah,
attempt.
yeah, it's attempt.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I learn every day.
All right.
So, yes. First, when I read the material, it was like, you have to pass. And then I heard back from BBS, because they didn't get back to me. It took them a while. And then it was like, no, if they don't pass, they have to take the law and ethics continuing education. Then they can get it, and then 90 days they can retest, but you'll still get your renewal of your
And
registration.
your hours can still.
And your hours can still count.
Okay.
So long as your registration is renewed. Okay? No. Okay, so the law and ethics contains 75 multiple choice questions for a 90-minute exam. Okay? Now, I've heard a couple of things. 75 questions are what they're going to score, but they may throw in 25 extra ones. So it may be 100 questions. So don't send me emails like, you told me 75. So they may do 100, but the scoreable is 75. Okay?
But we don't, do they just like randomly pick which one?
They do. How I knew that, how I learned that these were like the random 25 is like when I've never heard of it before. They're like, according to the such and such model. I was like, what's this model? And I realized that those are the ones that they're just throwing in there randomly. So I didn't spend time, like you're looking right now, I just did my best guess and kept going. Because the 90 minutes is clicking, it's ticking. So you gotta keep going through. Even if something throws you off, you're like, best guess, keep going. You can check it and come back later
Right, 'cause it's all on a computer.
It's on the computer, yeah. Okay. Waiting, allow, okay. This is how it's broken down. Law, 40%. So confidentiality, privilege and consent. B, limits of confidentiality, mandated reporting, 16%. Legal standards for professional practice, 10%. And then 60% is ethics. A, professional competence and preventing harm, 18%. Therapeutic relationships/services, 27%. And then C, business practices and policies, 15%. The tip that I give folks that I help prepare for licensing exam is think of yourself if you're working in isolation, like practice, private practice, and no one else is there. What would you do? That's how you frame every question. You don't have a supervisor. You don't have someone down the hall that you can go talk to. You are on your own, in your own office. What would you do? Legally, what would you do? And ethically, what should you do in that moment? Okay, that's a good way to frame it when you sit for the exam. Okay, because they want to know that you're that you know they want to know that you know what to do legally and ethically if you're providing services on your own. Okay, that's the law and ethics one. The second one, after you finish your total 3,200, right? Then you can sit for the clinical examination. Okay. Remember, this is geared towards the national, so you'll be nationally licensed. It is designed to assess an applicant's knowledge of psychosocial principles and methods in treatment and their application and ability to make judgments about appropriate techniques, methods, and objectives as applicable to the profession's scope of practice. So hopefully you'll know what your scope of practice and scope of competence is before you sit for that exam. So this exam consists of 170 questions, multiple choice questions, administered over 4 hours. Okay? So it's 4 hours. Now, they may throw in some additional questions to be 200 questions. Again, don't send me emails saying you said it was only 170, right? If you don't pass, you can take it after 90 days. It used to be 6 months. Now it's 90 days. So you only wait 90 days and then you can sit for the exam again. Again, don't wait a year after you attempted the first time to retake. Try to get back in there. Okay, take it again. Questions regarding that? So when you have met the eligibility requirements for the clinical exam, meaning you pass the law and ethics, meaning you have all your hours, BBS will send your eligibility information to ASWB and will also notify you of your eligibility to take the clinical exam. Once you receive the notification, you may contact the ASWB to register for their clinical examination. The current registration fee, which I already went over earlier, is $260 for that one. I did do this for you. No, this is, oh, I did it differently. So, how is the exam broken up? I tied in the actual courses that you took, so A, you know that it was covered. Remember that. So, human development and diversity and behavior in the environment, that's HIPSI 1 and 2. Assessment, diagnosis, and treatment planning, which is 26% of that test, that's 503. Psychotherapy, clinical interventions, and case management, that's 601, 602. And then professional ethics and values, that's 510. Ready to know how you lose? It's like worst case scenario. So how do you lose your license? Okay. They used to mail out. Now you can get it on the BBS's website, from what I understand. But they used to mail out who lost their license and why. Told you it's public information, folks. So it makes you think differently about how you conduct yourself. Okay, so sexual misconduct with clients, you can lose your license. Legal issues, lawsuits regarding inappropriate practice and malpractice, convictions, felonies, even DUIs can suspend your license. So I'm not judging, you may want to Uber or Lyft. Not paying your registration fees, they could suspend it or temporarily hold off until you finish that. Not staying up to date with your CEU requirements, that goes back to the 38 every 2 years, because once you're licensed, you have to do 38 continuing education every 2 years. Okay? You don't have to submit your continuing education copies of it to verify it. It's like the honor system. However, if they audit you, you have to submit it. So do keep track, right? Do keep track of your continuing education that you're completing. I think eventually it's going to move to electronic. So whomever is providing the CEUs, you have your number that you write down, they're going to automatically put that back to the system. I think we are getting there. So some links that's helpful, the different documents that I passed out. I have the application, the log, the supervisory plan, the supervisor's responsibility one. So you can just click on those links, or you can go directly to the Board of Behavioral Sciences website and download those for yourself. Additional information and resources. For more information on LCSW requirements, you can go there. You can also email me. A great exam prep program, someone was asking, Therapist Development Center. They have some great prep information. There's also Jerry Grossman, AATBS, Berkeley Institute, provides some test prep. But I like the Therapist Development Center. I mentioned that for those that wish to get licensed out of state, make sure, at a different state, make sure you look up the licensing requirements there.
That's all, folks.
Questions?
Same, that's all.
Oh, that's awful. Okay. Yes.
I don't know if you answered this, but I can remember late. What do you recommend for graduating students in terms of when to register?
As far as when to register?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what type of position you're looking for. If you want to go into like meso macro, then don't get registered because you're going to go into more of management, more activism, etc. But if you want to go into direct clinical, then go ahead and register. So it depends on where you're going to
Right, right. So say something clinical.
register. Start the process now. Yes.
Would you suggest going the LCSW route even if later you want to go into the meso macro setting?
You can, yeah, because there's different opportunities that can open up for being an LCSW. Yeah.
And I mentioned on our resume to put like pending for our number. Should we not do that until we've like sent our packet to the board, or can we do that now?
I would put it, if you know that you're going to do it, I would put it on now. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, do you know more detail about the process internally here? I've heard a couple things like we can get ahead of things besides just getting all our information ready. But like the hold up for us, right, is to get our graduation posted on our transcript and to get that pasted into our application, right?
Yeah.
So I've heard that you could like ahead of time request your transcript, but put once graduation is posted. I don't know if that's something you have to do in person or online, but I've also heard that you should be like checking online to see if it's posted, and the day it posts, come here and get them to print for you so you can FedEx it.
I haven't heard that, but if you want to be proactive, do that. Yes, I will follow up with them. Yeah.
Does it matter if you, so once you start the whole licensing process, does it matter how long before you graduated? Like, let's say you get another job where you do something else, and then 10 years from now you want to go into clinical, can you still start it? And
Yes, you can. Yes, doesn't matter when you got to this. Yeah.
So how will we know when our transcript degree is posted? We have to check.
You have to check. And that was, we were speaking to a moment ago. You have to follow up and check. And maybe that's something that you get the notification for once it's ready. I'll wrap it up.
Can we take CEUs now?
Yes.
Would it count towards our license? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we would?
Yeah, because you don't have to put anything on there for that. So you can take continuing education credit now.
With the test prep link that you put, is there a cost associated with that?
There is.
Okay. Is it like a year, or do you like pay annually?
I don't know. I think how they did it was You pay a certain fee for a package, and until you pass, you have access to those materials or something like that.
When we find out whether or not we failed one of the parts of the exam, like the first exam or the second exam, do we get any feedback on which parts would fail on?
Right away. You get it when you press enter. They'll give you a printout at the testing center.
Oh, okay.
And you'll see which areas.
Okay.
Yeah. If you pass, it'll just say pass. You won't get any credit. Like,
I want some
I
feedback.
want to know
How
what
well
I
I
did,
did.
right? But I was so thankful that I passed, I didn't care about the feedback. I was like, just give me my license. Yeah.
Where can we get your PowerPoint?
We're going to send it out. We're going to send out my PowerPoint.
Yes.
You need the rest of it. Yes, I'm going to send it out.
Okay.
Or you can email me directly. Faster than.
Will it just be through the department? Like who's
Who's going to send the email?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who's going to send it. Exactly, I don't know who's going to respond. Yes.
Here on the tracking sheet, on this paper, I see breaking down the supervision individual face-to-face and supervision group.
Yes.
This is just for us to
Keep track.
Keep track and how much of each should be.
So it's 2 hours for group and then 1 hour for individual a week.
2 hours a group.
Or 1 hour of individual. So you don't have to have both. For BBS, your agency may require you to do both, but you just need one or the other. 1 hour of individual or 2 hours of group supervision. Now, for those that are working at organizations, agencies that do not have a licensed person there to supervise your hours, you would have to get someone to provide supervision for you outside of that organization. There is a sample letter template that you would have to get from the BBS's website. The agency organization has to agree to allow you to get the clinical supervision from someone that's not at the agency, because you're working under that other person's license, and they need to know that you're doing that. Okay? Legally and ethically, they need to know that. Yes.
I took ethics for mental health professionals in my undergrad in psychology. Do you know what that sort of course is, or is that a good preparation for the test? Or I don't know, you might not know, but I'm just wondering if the textbook we were using, because they had mandated reporting, they had.
It may be helpful if it was a clinical psych.
Yeah.
It may be helpful.
Maybe like ask the professor if they know, like, if it, how does that, because they should know that that's their lesson.
Yeah, but it's a different discipline, especially depending on what they're.
But I know we also talked about that code of ethics and social work. We had to compare social work ethics code and psychology and MFT, so that was one assignment.
And how does that go?
There are some certain differences.
Okay, so that's why no. That's why you should not reach out to the psych department for social work stuff, right? So you can, and what I would recommend is taking a continuing education course from like NASW, so that it's within our scope of practice and competence.
Right.
What we're trained to do and what we're educated to do as social workers. You don't want to confuse yourself.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yes, like for example, if I work at DMH, the EBP trainings, in which section this can be applied, like an hour? Section B, like a research and.
I would count it under the research and consultation.
Section B?
Yeah, section B. I would count that. Yeah.
If my supervisor is out for the week or cancels supervision, can I count those
No.
hours?
If the supervisor is out on vacation, you just put a line right through that week. I know. If you're out for a week, you just put a line. For my school-based folks, if you're out for those 3 weeks, you put a line. If you're out for spring break for a week, I know. So 14 weeks for school-based folks, you're not going to be able to count.
Well,
It'll take you a little bit longer. It's okay. You get 14 weeks off.
It's still, that would still count that 1 hour. It doesn't have to be 3 hours.
Correct. Either. 2 hours of group or 1 hour of individual supervision. Yes. Hold on one second. Because it's new, I don't know yet. This came out January 2016. So I should, Monica asked, what's the pass rate? I don't know. I don't know.
And one more, can we get a head start on any of the additional classes we have to take, or does it have to be after we get licensed? Or after we get that code?
You can take them for license, once you are licensed, it won't count because you have to put your license number on those credits. But you can take the continuing education.
But it wouldn't count?
It will be helpful for like preparing for the law and ethics exam. So it'll count for that. You don't need it to count for like the credit piece,
Okay.
right? You just need it for that unless you didn't pass, and then they're going to require you to take the law and ethics, and then retest after 90 days. You can take it again. Yes.
Sorry, so the courses that we need to do for continuing ed,
Yes.
okay, those are to apply for your license, right? Or just, well, you have to do them before you can take your test.
Correct.
But we can start doing them now.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And is it a specific class called this, or
Yep.
is it anything in this category?
It's called this, the ones that I gave you.
So they are specifically designed to be this requirement?
Correct.
Okay. It's not just like any class on?
No.
Okay.
Once you're licensed, you can do any, so long as, I think, 15 of those hours is law and ethics. Every renewal period, we have to do law and ethics. Everything else can be whatever.
Looking at the application right now and the request for live scan section where it asks for address, if we do make a PO box, like we should use the PO box number throughout the entire thing, or for the live scan, we have to provide like our home address.
For the live scan, I will provide your actual home address.
Okay.
But for the actual application,
Like where
at the top, the beginning of the application,
application for registration.
yes, I would use the PO box for that. Okay? So, for those that still have questions, you can hang out. For those that don't have questions, we are finished. Hope this is helpful.